Hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast edition of Rosen Sports Monday on this beautiful early fall day. I want to call it. We'll call it late summer. We don't want to rush things too much. Great state fair weather. Great weather for just about anything. First, I want to thank wonderful sponsor Charlie Swanson over at Lexus of Wayzata, Lexus of Maplewood for helping this product continue to push along. And we'll hear from him a little bit later. Hear from their company and understand why Lexus is the place to go visit. My special guest today, a longtime friend of mine, someone I've admired from a business standpoint, Dave St. Peter, who's been a man of many hats with the Minnesota Twins organization for many, many years. And yes, we will get into the nitty-gritty of what went on before you start yelling at me to ask him tough questions. But Dave, thanks for being here today. I know, hopefully, we'll talk about it at the end, but this might be on the horizon for you in the future.
Mark, great to be with you today.
Thanks.
I'm trying to remember, my Twins journey started in 1990.
Unbelievable.
I think I first ran into Mark Rosen as an intern with the North Stars in 1989. You and I both had a lot more hair then.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
But it is good to be with you. I've been listening to your podcast. I need to get my fill of Mark Rosen. So it's been
very
good.
Kind
Congratulations.
of you. Very kind of you. Well, speaking of the North Stars, man, I can't. That's right. 1989. You said you started with the Twins in 1990. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I try to do my research. But were you managing the team's retail store? 91, the year they won the last one, the World Series.
Yeah, I interned with the Twins in 1990, and then in July of that year, they came to me midway through the season. They said, "We have good news and bad news." I said, "Well, what's the good news?" I said, "We'd like to hire you full time." I said, "Okay, what's the bad news?" I said, "Well, it's not really in the traditional front office. We have a retail store in Richfield at the Hub Shopping Center."
Oh, my goodness.
Some people may remember that store. They needed somebody to manage it. So I had to decide, do I really want to go do this? I did it. And of course, sales went through the roof that October, Mark, only curtailed by the Halloween blizzard of October 31, which, and I look back on it, had nothing to do with my management of that store. Had everything to do with Jack Morris and Kirby Puckett, and the rest is history. We win the World Series. And then I moved into the traditional front office, so to speak, in February of 92 in a communications type role.
Well, a lot of people ask various, you get this a lot, I'm sure. I get it from a broadcasting standpoint. Young people going into either in high school or college, whatever. I want to do what you're doing. I want to get into sports, management, whatever it might be. I'm sure you've been asked a million times for advice on that subject, but you look at your role. Did you want to be a sports journalist? Did I read that correctly? Or sports PR? Was that the way you were thinking? Or
I went to school in Grand Forks, University of North Dakota, Harvard of the Midwest, as I refer to it. And, I had that epiphany for me second semester of my freshman year. I was in an intro to mass communications class and, kind of thought, I have a lot of interest in media, journalism, maybe broadcast. I felt like I could write a little bit. I loved radio, and decided, shortly after that class, maybe I could take some of that focus and combine it with something I was passionate about, which was sports, and build a career in sports communications, whatever that would look like. My dad thought I was nuts. Others probably questioned it. But I decided from that point forward, that's what I was going to give it, go for. And started working in the sports information office, went to work for the Grand Forks Herald, did as much writing as I possibly could, so that by the time I graduated in May of 89, I had a resume that was that told the story, and it thankfully told Joe Janis, the PR director at the North Stars at the time, a story to hire this kid as an intern. And I ended up joining the North Stars organization that summer and was then bitten by the professional sports bug. And that ultimately led to the role with the Twins, which led to me being there for 35 years. But that was the goal, and I've certainly worked within that goal.
But it can be a quantum leap between being in the PR, whatever it might be, and then literally getting into the front office, becoming a team president, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, that was never my goals to be the team president. I'll be clear on that. I didn't even allow my dreams ever go that far. But that ultimately happened for me, and I've told that story many times as well. Mark, I showed up every day, put my head down, and just did my job, and that was really the values that were instilled in me growing up where I did in Bismarck, North Dakota, and my parents. I felt like, if I could stack good day after good day, good week after good week, things will take care of themselves.
Yeah, I was reading an interesting, I think, quote from you in one of the pieces I read about you that, you said the first 10 to 15 years, you were saying, I was not an effective manager of people. I was difficult to work with. Were you self-aware of that during your time?
Well, I think I probably expected others to go at it like I went at it, which was, insanely intense and, that head down, get it done mentality. And I'm not sure that always played well. Look, I established wonderful relationships with so many great people. And we had a lot of, great things that happened during those first 10 to 15 years that I was a president of the club, including, won a lot of games during that 2001 through 2010 window, 6 division titles in 9 years, built Target Field, opened it to rave reviews. But I could be challenging. And I think later in my tenure, certainly with COVID, you started to see the humanity of people and everything everybody else was dealing with in their own lives. And I think, other leaders, had an impact on me about how I could take more time to invest in those relationships at a deeper level and at a different level. How could I invest in the growth and development of everybody around me in a more intentional way? And that was really my focus over the last 5 or 6 years.
Well, and it isn't so much even out of season that you have to understand people around you. It's not a 9-to-5 job. There's a lot of weekends involved, a lot of nights involved. It's not that type of a job where you're basically, and you said you were a people pleaser. You wanted everyone to try to work as hard as you were working. But anytime you're in Major League Sports or broadcasting like that, it's not a quote unquote normal job.
Yeah, no chance. It's a 24/7, 365 existence. And if you accept that role as a leader of an organization, I think you accept that outcome. In baseball in particular, Mark, when you think about the arc of a season and the 162 games plus, spring training and hopefully plus, postseason, every night we played a home game at either the Metrodome or Target Field. In my mind, that was the most important thing happening in the state that day, and I needed to be there. Later in our career, in my career, I was really proud of the fact that we were able to instill more redundancy across the organization, which created, frankly, more life balance and really changed our culture in a really positive way. Because when I started with the Twins in 1990, you were expected to be at the ballpark every single game, and you didn't miss a game. And that was that's kind of how I grew up in baseball. That's not the mentality today for most of our front office people, and I think that's a good thing.
When you think back to getting Target Field built and okayed by the legislature and all the heavy lifting that went on with that, and we see, the end result, because I remember, I had my restaurant downtown in 1991, looking over at that parking lot where I think they played volleyball at times, and I thought, there is no way they're going to shoehorn a baseball park into this place. And of course, people were screaming maybe for a rooftop or a retractable roof, and you had so many dollars you could work with. But what was that when you look back on it? How difficult a process was that to finally get finalized? Yeah,
it was a massive challenge, and I think Carl Pohlad uttered the word "new ballpark" for the first time in 1995, just 4 years removed from the 91 World Series. And when you do the math, just, 13 years into the Metrodome's existence, it would take us until May of 2006 to actually pass a viable plan at the legislature. And that journey from 95 to 2006 was filled with all kinds of starts and stops and drama and crisis and angst along the way. And, I think it's that perspective that I look back on, with, both a level of probably angst, but also a level of fulfillment that we ultimately were able to come together as an organization, but also more importantly as a community and as a state to forge forward on a plan that would ultimately build Target Field and entrench Major League Baseball in this marketplace for the next generation of fans. And everything that happened from May of 2006 until April of 2010 is just a blur. It was the most amazing, exhilarating, exhausting period of my Twins career. And at the time I used to say, God, I'd never want to do this again. But I kind of miss it, Mark. That was an unbelievable time when we were building the ballpark, the anticipation for outdoor baseball. Twins baseball, was at a different, there was a different feel about it as related to looking ahead to the future of having a ballpark versus playing baseball in the corner of a football stadium, which we did for 28 years. And as Ken Herbeck says better than anybody, it was a horrible place to watch baseball, but there was a lot of great baseball played there.
That's so true.
And it was true. Historic baseball.
But I think the Twins always felt like they were kind of second class. I don't think second class citizens, but it was built for football. It was built for the Vikings after both teams left Met Stadium. I think the last dual purpose stadium that existed on the planet here, at least in our case.
No doubt, and the marketplace really was deserving of a major league ballpark, and it started to change actually with the Exo Energy Center. We noticed a pretty significant fan sentiment around what a new arena meant to people in the market, and I think that played a role, along with, of course, the Torrey Hunter, Brad Radke, Corey Koski, Doug Mankiewicz led Twins of 2000, 2001. All guys that were rookies on those 98, 99 teams. But that team really, I think, reignited the spark around the marketplace about what it meant to have a Major League Baseball team.
I want to reestablish our guest today, Dave St. Peter. Are you like done with the Twins now? You got your Twins jacket on today?
Yeah, I know. A lot of people hope that I'm done. Mark, I've got a foot in and I've got a foot out. I'm still involved with the club as an advisor, certainly to ownership and to leadership. And I've had some special projects that I've been working on with them over the course of the last several months. I oversaw our television side of things for a long, long time, and we just made a pivot to a new media platform through MLB Media and Twins TV. I'm really happy with the reach we have there. I also was very involved with some of our legislative effort over the course of the last couple years. So as I look to the future, I'm obviously stepping away from the organization, but I've stayed involved one way or another over the course of the last few months.
We will get into ownership situation. You're just talking about television, a few other things affecting the state of baseball right now. But I do want to go back to one thing, and that's, I know you've gotten very involved with the players. You mentioned a bunch of them, but the strong relationship you had with a lot of the former players and up to present day. But no player meant more of this franchise in terms of winning and popularity than Kirby Puckett, who sadly came to an early demise in his life. The glaucoma ended his career in 1995, I believe. His untimely death in spring of 2006. I'll never forget it, being down in spring training when that happened. Kirby, I think, had an unfortunate falling out also with the Twins after that forced retirement. But how do you summarize your relationship with Kirby and what he meant? Because I always understood that the Twins were very close to kind of bringing him back into the fold, so to speak, that he would have been. He's so embraced and beloved by the fans, like no other player. Yeah,
I love Kirby Puckett, and I miss him every single day. He was a dear friend to me. He was incredibly helpful to me as a player in welcoming me into that clubhouse and modeling how to go about dealing with people. And what I mean by that is my first role with the Twins was as an intern in 1990 managing the Celebrity Bat Kids program. So every single day I would host a group of kids down on that field, and guess what? They were there to get one guy's autograph.
Right.
It was Kirby Puckett. And Kirby Puckett would do a master class every single day during batting practice. And we go back and look it up. Kirby went on the disabled list. We called it, I think, the disabled list at the time. I think one time in his career, it was in the summer of 1990. And he was hurting, and he wasn't able to really come out and do that. And God, did I miss him in those days. But he was great. Obviously spent a lot of time with Kirby over the course of my Twins career. And, he could light up a room like nobody. And he's obviously, in my opinion, maybe the most beloved athlete to ever play in the state of Minnesota. And he backed it up, not just during the regular season, but in the biggest moments, winning not one, but two world championships. So At the end, obviously things, went haywire for
Right.
Kirby when he lost, in my opinion, the structure of baseball, the discipline around getting ready to go to spring training and ultimately having that structure in his day. And, I spent a lot of time with Kirby, even when he had departed the Twins, and felt like I was making inroads on bringing him back. And unfortunately, in 2006, he had a catastrophic health event and passed away, which, changed, I think, a lot of different things. I often would wonder how he would have felt about Target Field, how he would have felt about the modern game. He was a wonderful ambassador. And despite all the things that have been written and said about Kirby, he was a human. He wasn't perfect by any stretch, but he did a lot of good for a lot of people in this state and in this region. When you think about Children's Heart Link and you think about all the other causes that he was involved in, he loved Minnesota, and I know he loved the Twins.
I call him the Pied Piper of Minnesota. I've never been around another athlete like him who had that kind of magnetic draw. We have some good ones right now in this town with Anthony Edwards and obviously Justin Jefferson and a few others. Nafisa Collier of the Minnesota Lynx. But there was something special about Puck, and people named their dogs, their kids, their next after Kirby. Kirby Puckett was just a name, I think, of the late, great Bob Casey and how he announced his every at-bat. I got goosebumps thinking about it, but maybe I'm an old romantic that way, but getting to know Kirby as well was special because he had magnetic personality.
And the impact he had on other players around the league, he had to have been the most beloved player of his generation. The respect for what he meant on the field and even off the field. So we got to see that, Mark, whether it be every year when he'd bring people in for his celebrity pool tournament, but I got to see it in spades even when he went into Cooperstown and how beloved he was. And his career was cut short. He was a borderline guy, but the way he dealt with the media, the way he showed up every day and played in those biggest moments, there was no doubt he was going to get into Cooperstown on that first ballot.
Yeah, that was a special day. I got a chance to go there as well with Kirby and Dave Winfield. Going into the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. That was a baseball bubblegum card moment that I'll never forget when you're there. It was amazing.
Yeah, as I said, I miss him. One of the things I was proud of, and I had the chance over time to bring Harmon Killebrew back into the fold in our organization, and then Rodney Carew, both of which were estranged. And you mentioned Kirby at the end was estranged, but that history. I always felt like the Twins as a middle market club, we had a history that would rival any other middle market franchise, maybe with the exception of the Cardinals. I thought we had a history we could celebrate. And I thought it was much better for the Twins to have Harmon Killebrew and Rod Carew and along with Tony Oliva and Ken Herbeck, but all these guys in the fold. So I worked overtime to try to make sure that we had that relationship. And I always thought that was important, and hopefully that'll continue going forward as we look to the future. Yeah,
it's crazy to think about kids growing up who never had the opportunity to watch Kirby Puckett play. That his career unfortunately was cut short, and they have to look at him the way that maybe we looked at Ted Williams or someone. I mean, it's just they just know he's this kind of mythic character that lifted the Twins to 2 world championships.
Yeah, I think that's right. And he's, I think it's important that we continue to try to tell that story. I do know that the impact that he had, though, on people, I think about it like even within the Twins organization, the impact that Kirby had on Torrey Hunter, how Torrey Hunter had impact on, say, a Denard Span, how Torrey Hunter continues to have impact on Byron Buxton. He is still paying it forward in some different ways, and I think that does matter. And but Kirby's legacy will live on forever, and certainly what he meant to Minnesotans around that 87 through 91 window when he could have left for more money in 92, signed that contract to stay a Twin. I think that matters as well to his legacy. And of course, as I think about everything he did for so many different people off the field in a positive way, that's the Kirby Puckett I choose to celebrate. We're talking with Dave St. Peter about a lot of subjects. We're going to take a quick break, and yes, we will talk about what is going on right now with the ownership situation, et cetera, with the Minnesota Twins. Stay with us here on Rosen Sports Monday. Hey, Rosie here for Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. If you're in the market for a new luxury vehicle, look no further than my good friend Charlie Swanson at Lexus.
Whether you're on the west or the east side of the Twin Cities, they have got you covered with two great locations, Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. Check out the all-new Lexus TX, a spacious SUV with 3 rows of seating and plenty of room for all your gear. Head over to lexusofwayzata.com or lexusofmaplewood.com for details and to find your next ride today.
Hey, this is Randy Shaver. Along with Kevin Gorg, we host the show Fantasy Huddle on Talk North. Each week, we're going to break down the matchups for the NFL season and try to give you the best chance to win your fantasy football games each and every week. Join us for Fantasy Huddle on Talk North.
And welcome back with our conversation with Dave St. Peter, longtime member of the Minnesota Twins organization and wearing a lot of different hats. And okay, let's just get to it. Present day. It was a stunning day a short time ago. The Pohlad family made an announcement they were not selling the team, rather adding limited partners. But Joe Pohlad, the Pohlad family would stay in basically ownership capacity. The backlash from the fans, the media was immediate. What happened? How can you describe what went on, Dave, behind the curtain?
Well, Mark, I appreciate the question. And when we went back to last fall, the family at the time announced they had engaged Allen and Company to explore a sale process. So that process played out over 9 months, and many interested parties, engaged with Allen and Company with their interest in either investing in or buying the Twins. And some of those discussions with different parties have been reported. At the end of the day, the Pohlads ultimately, fairly recently engaged with a couple different groups, one of them being local, the other one being more East Coast based, that had an interest in just investing in the team as limited partners, with the Pohlads retaining the control ownership. And that ultimately is where the family decided to go. I think they fully recognize and understand that there's many in the marketplace that would probably love to see the team sold. They appreciate that passion. At the end of the day, I do think these LPs are going to be beneficial around not just stabilizing the balance sheet of the Twins, so to speak, but also I think they do expect to collaborate with the Pohlads as it relates to future operations and really as they set a vision for what the future of the Twins looks like. So that's where we are today. Major League Baseball has a process that they will conduct around approval of the limited partners. And once that approval process is finalized, I'd expect these LPs will be identified.
Okay, you're just going to answer my next question. Will the public find out soon?
Yeah, I think on the day this was announced, Mark, it was discussed that those LPs will be identified, but there's an approval process with the league. So out of fairness, I think to those LPs, at this point, we're not ready to identify those folks, but they'll be talked about at the right time.
Did anyone, any group, any individual come close to matching? Was it matching the price the Twins were asking for?
Yeah, I'm not privy to all of the specifics of every offer or what have you. Certainly there were many groups, some of which had, I think, capital stacked, so to speak, that would have failed to meet muster with the league. That was at least true, I think, at least on one. But, Mark, I think from a family perspective, as they looked at this, certainly there are economic considerations for sure, but there's also considerations as it relates to what they wanted to do in terms of the emotional connection they've had to the Twins. So, at the end of the day, I think they landed in a place where they felt as though it could be, twofold. One is they could find limited partners that can come in and help again stabilize the balance sheet, so to speak. But then secondly, collaborate with them on the future of vision for the organization.
We as a public really don't know much about Joe Pohlad, the Pohlad family. We're aware of Jim. Obviously, Carl was the patriarch. We don't hear him in news conference. We don't hear him out front. We don't really know him. He's a man of mystery. And because of that, I think it adds more suspicion to where's his head at? How badly does he want this team to win? All those sorts of things, out of sight, out of mind. He's a young man. Tell us more about his desire. He seems to really want to hold on to this team.
Yeah, I think the family would like to hold on to the team. I mean, that goes beyond just Joe. I think they were wide open to a wide range of possibilities with the sale process, but and I'll let them speak for themselves as it relates to, what the specifics of that are. But there is a commitment to the Twins, and there's a commitment to trying to put the Twins in the best possible position over time to compete for a championship. I think, the recent, coming out of, the last recent round of players, we obviously felt really good about our chances in 2023. We break the curse, so to speak. We get into the second round of the playoffs. We come up a little short against Houston. And then obviously in 2024, up until the last 6 weeks of the season, we were feeling really good about that club as well. And we've stubbed our toe on the field the last 6 weeks. And then this year again, where we felt like we underperformed. So, as we look to the future, I think we felt now was probably the time to be honest with ourselves about where we're at. And clearly there was a reset at the trade deadline, but I can assure you, don't take that as a sign that the family doesn't want to win and Joe doesn't want to win. I think they're trying to be realistic about what's our best path to go win. Well, and how do we do that?
Let's go back to 2023, because this is the one that sticks in my craw. You mentioned you broke the playoff losing streak. Target Field, I remember driving down there right after doing my radio show, was buzzing. The place was sold out. I don't recall, even when they played the Yankees in the first round of the playoffs, when they first opened up Target Field, it didn't have that feeling as it did in 2023. I mean, it's an afternoon game, beat Toronto.
Because we won, Mark.
Well, but it was just even walking in there. No, I know what you mean, but you won. Yeah, the Yankees were the Yankees. We all know that. Eventually lost to Houston in the next round. But fans could see a really bright future, Dave. Instead, payroll was slashed in the offseason. And the messaging, to me, could not have been worse, more ill-timed in terms of, well, we went this far, but instead of kind of reinvesting or not signing an Ohtani or someone, but they lost Sonny Gray. But let's just figure out a way of using our young players to catapult us to the next round. That to me was I don't understand. I still to this day don't understand it.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate the question, Mark. And that decision was made, certainly from a business perspective. Joe said it at the time that he felt as though he needed to make a business decision. That was the direction provided from ownership. If you're Derek Falvey at the time, you're not going to use that as an excuse on why we didn't win. Walking, I was in Texas, I think it was August 18th. I think we were just taken 3 out of 4 against the Rangers. We had like the third best record in the American League, and we were charging towards the playoffs with 98% of playoff odds. So we came up short in the last 6 weeks of the season. I think we all felt, though, even with that payroll reduction, Mark, that we had a club that was capable not just of winning the division, but doing damage in October. So history obviously will show that was not the case. So we came up short, and I acknowledge that. But there's such an emphasis on payroll, and I can appreciate that. But payroll is not always the end all. You look at what the Milwaukee Brewers are doing this year with a payroll that right now that's quite a bit less than what we started the season with. It comes down to other things. Players have to stay healthy. Players have to perform. We didn't get it done the last 6 weeks of the season, and there's a lot of blame to go around for that.
Well, and speaking of that, I mean, if you talk about the nucleus of this team that's intact right now in terms of the everyday players, you think of a Royce Lewis, number 1 overall draft pick, and Matt Wallner, Trevor Larnach, Brooks Lee. Those are the guys that you have to count on to perform at a high level, to be like the Milwaukee Brewers. And
100%.
They're not doing it right now. And that's not management's fault. Doesn't it kind of come down to the players a little bit?
We got to find out what we have, Mark. I mean, I think Brooks Lee getting an extended run at shortstop is really, really important. I think Royce Lewis getting an extended run of good health is really, really important. And that's what this time is for, and probably was what you're going to see more of in 2026. The good news is that I think we can hopefully blend in some additional talent here. Walker Jenkins is coming to St. Paul. I think you'll see Culpepper, the shortstop, our number 1 pick from a year ago, who's had a great year in Wichita, go eventually here to St. Paul. We're really bullish on a lot of the young pitching depth that we have. Joe Ryan and Pablo Lopez still anchor this starting rotation. We need to get Pablo back into this rotation. That will help. I tend to look at the future as being we're a lot closer than actually probably people think. This is not a full set rebuild. I think we view it more in the form of a reset in terms of kind of what this club can look like. But it's going to be younger. It's going to probably need to be more athletic. And pitching ultimately is going to need to be the strength of this club.
Well, speaking of pitching, beyond the position players that were traded at the deadline, your bullpen was pretty much decimated by the moves, Duran, Varland. So it's kind of left Rocco with limited choices late games, and you can see what's been happening of late. So that needs also to be rebuilt.
Yeah, and I'm optimistic we can build that. I think Derek has demonstrated since he's been here we can build a bullpen. I worry more about our starting pitching, and I worry more about our position player depth. The bullpen is certainly important, Mark. Make no mistake, but it doesn't matter unless you have those other things clicking. And I really feel good about the young core again of starting pitching, and I believe on the position player side. You mentioned some of the names. I'll mention a couple others. Matty Wallner, Trevor Larnach getting an extended run to play at bats against lefties. These games matter greatly in terms of those guys and others that are going to be a big part of the future here.
Let's talk about the television situation. You mentioned it at the outset. It's a head scratcher a little bit. Explain to the folks what is happening with the Twins in regard to the present and the future of the Twins network that I now subscribe to, that I get, that a lot of people do. Streaming versus people cut the cord. We all know, we hear these stories, but what's baseball and specifically the Twins' place right now in the future to get the product out there to the most possible people?
Yeah, well, people will recall we were part of what is now FanDuel. If you go back a year ago, and we were in about 1.2 million homes. You could access Twins baseball, less than that during a good chunk of the summer because Comcast had blocked out Bally or FanDuel at the time. We made the decision to go to what we would call Twins TV, which is a Major League Baseball produced broadcast. And, I think all of the reviews on the production side of our games has been incredibly positive. And then we also had the best of all worlds where we had linear distribution, cable, satellite, so DirecTV, Comcast, Charter, et cetera, combined with a direct-to-consumer option, so streaming. And, the streaming subs in this market it's been wildly successful. We're very, very pleased where that is at in terms of the reach of Twins baseball went from about 1.2 million homes to north of 4 million homes across the region. In addition to that, we did an over-the-air package with Channel 9, who have been great partners to the Twins. So for 2025, we're feeling really good. Economics, not so good, Mark. It's a pretty significant reduction from the old rights fee model we used to have with FanDuel. But we felt it organizationally that the reach of our games was frankly more important than the financial side of our games.
But does that dovetail into what our previous discussion about salaries and how they're, because they're not, the Pollens aren't dipping into their own, they're in debt, apparently not they're in debt, but the club was in debt. That they're not,
but local media plays a role in the economic outlook of the team, 100%.
Well, how does Major League Baseball feel about that?
How they're dealing with it in 5 or 6 other markets as well, but maybe 10 markets. Mark, it's a conundrum for the league, and it's something that the league and this commissioner are spending a ton of time on. I think the good news, Mark, is that the content continues to draw significant ratings and viewership, and there's a plan here. This commissioner, more than any other commissioner, has talked openly about the desire to aggregate all 30 teams' rights, particularly on the streaming side, to one platform. And the Twins were actually a forerunner on this, so we feel like we're part of building that. We're one of the first teams to go to, say, a platform. You may see changes on this even for 2026, where we potentially partner with, there's been reports that perhaps the Twins and other teams may end up on an ESPN-type platform. I don't have all the specifics on that yet, nor is that official. But the goal here is to provide all 30 clubs on one platform. And then what that would allow, Mark, for is, in theory, is to put the genie back into the bottle. And what I mean by that is the reason the National Football League, the primary reason they have been successful is that from day one in that league, they decided to pool all media revenue equally. And that, in essence, is what Commissioner Manfred's vision is for baseball. And is that able to be done? We're going to find out. I'm optimistic it can be done, but it also dovetails with economic reform and what the future of our game looks like in terms of on the field. So these are all things that are high priorities in New York. They're high priorities for the Pohlads and for the Twins, and I can assure you they're central to in my opinion, to being, if you're a fan of the Twins, what you're hoping for the future.
But the NFL also has a salary cap that every team has to abide by. And,
Correct.
we were all aware of the dollars that are being spent, NHL, NBA, different kind of aprons, they call it. I mean, can you ever imagine Major League Baseball having a salary cap? I mean, that the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Twins will be spending the same amount of money on baseball salaries? I just don't see that happening.
Mark, again, there's a lot of talk. The current CBA runs through December of 2026.
Yeah,
so another season.
Dicey time.
I'm optimistic about a partnership with the players, a true partnership. And I think that's how you have to think about this, is that you're in this together. And as the league does well, the players do well. I think ultimately is what it requires. I can't get into all the specifics about caps and floors and other things, free agency, those things. Those are going to get sorted out in a negotiation. But I do know that there's a strong desire to form maybe I would say a stronger partnership with the players.
I saw that, I didn't see it specifically, but I heard about it when Rob Manfred, I think, went on during the Little League World Series, and he mentioned something about realignment in baseball, and as if to say we're not going to have a traditional American and National League, and there's some different formats where the Twins would be, located with the Cubs and the White Sox, geographical divisions. Is that a feasible possibility?
Well, I think what the commissioner indicated was that there's a strong desire to see expansion. So if you were to expand, say, from 30 teams to 32 teams, then you could do some things schedule-wise that are kind of interesting. And maybe you go to 4 8-team divisions, or you go to 8 4-team divisions, similar to the National Football League. There's all kinds of different places the Twins could go. We have strong feelings about where we think we should go. I could personally kind of like the idea of being with the Cubs, the White Sox, and the Brewers. Mm-hmm. I think that'd be a fun place for our fans, but we'll see. But I do think that that is a realistic possibility after this next labor negotiation. Both expansion and realignment are going to get a serious consideration. I also think there's going to be other things on the table. I think they'll look at the length of the season, which is a little bit of a sacred cow in baseball. Mm-hmm. Why do we play 162 games? What does postseason baseball look like? Do you find a runway for maybe a little bit more postseason? All of these things are going to be, I think, on the table for discussion and should be. I think the benefit of the pitch clock is twofold. Mm-hmm. One, it made our games 2.5 hours, which brought it back, Mark, into right where it needs to be, not just for those going to games, but for those watching or listening. But the second thing it did is it gave permission to this commissioner to start to look at shaking the tree in some other ways, around changing some other aspects of the game that in our sport, maybe more than any others, are so embedded and so rigid around history that change is really difficult in baseball.
How are they addressing, or is it young people? To me, I grew up, baseball was it. That was all I really cared about. Different generation now, where people are on their phones all the time. Everything's quick. They get their news that way. They get their information that way. And baseball's too slow of a game. Are you seeing it from a demographic standpoint, ways that they're going to be able to attract younger fans to their game?
Yeah, 100%. We already are seeing it. The demographics on baseball have gotten younger the last 3 years, which, I think has everything to do with the pitch clock. I think, you could make the case it's other aspects, whether it be our game experience, which is really strong and I think plays well to younger people who want a social experience. I also think the amount of young star players in the game today plays a role in that. But I think it's the pitch clock, which is, we see it at our ballpark at Target Field. And here's what people don't give enough credit to the pitch clock on. Before the pitch clock, a high percentage of our fans, and I'll just say I'll go back to 2019, we had a really good team. We won 100 games. There was a big number of fans that would leave by the start of the 7th or for sure the 8th inning. they would leave the ballpark before the crescendo of the game. I mean, let's be honest. So many things happen often in the 8th or the 9th inning. Can you imagine going to a play and leaving before the climax, or going to an NFL game and leaving just because the game's long before the game is decided in the last 5 minutes of the game, or an NBA game? Almost every game in the NBA is decided at clutch time, right? In baseball, people were leaving before the crescendo of the game. And that was another big benefit of the pitch clock. That doesn't happen anymore. People stay till the end because we're in that 2.5 hour window.
I was at the game last week when the Twins played Oakland here. It was a close game. It was 2-2 extra inning game. But I got to tell you, Dave, it made me sad because there was the atmosphere just wasn't there. There was kind of a malaise, and obviously the Twins record, Oakland's record. So I know you're going to say probably you got some young players coming up, et cetera, et cetera. But are you truly optimistic that the Twins can get this thing turned around, given the environment and the sales and the payroll and everything that's going on?
Mark, the franchise has been resilient. I could speak to this. I saw it. I'm going to challenge you. Go back to as challenging as this feels to you, go back to the late 1990s, post Puckett, post Herbeck, the 97, 98, 99. I mean, Mark, I'm not suggesting that's a good comp, but it's the only comp I'm going to pull through. We will navigate through this. The franchise is bigger than any individual person or thing. The brand of the Twins is bigger than that. It's going to need to start from within in terms of our franchise getting organized around what this new ownership structure is going to look like, what our leadership is going to look like, and what our team is going to look like. But I have a high level of optimism that we will navigate to a better place. And I think it will start in 2026 with a young team that you can see the future. Very similar to what we've done at some other junctures in Twins baseball and Twins history. I do think the future, or what's going to happen with labor and with media, particularly on a national media front, is going to play a role as well. But those things are outside of our control. What we can control is what we do with our team, what we can do with our ballpark, continue to invest in the game day experience, and making sure that people can feel proud of being a Minnesota Twins fan.
In the meantime, there may be some new challenges for Dave St. Peter as well down the road.
You know what? I welcome that. I've had a blessed run within baseball, but there's some other things I think that I would love to be involved in. I care deeply about Minnesota, and I also continue to be a passionate sports fan, and I'm curious about maybe how I could add some value in some other places.
We appreciate your time, Dave. I know we'll be seeing you down the road. Thanks so much, Dave St. Peter.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.